Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to a slightly different rendition of the RSF1 podcast. So this is the weekly recap of all the races that have happened in the RSF1 racing this week. We are still making our way through season 4 of the league, and yeah, we're going along very nicely, in my view. Obviously, a few changes have had to be made through from streaming and who's commentating and races and where they race, but still, we've had some very good action at the moment, and championships are slowly taking place. So, some good stuff already. I'm RSF1 Michael, also known as Brundle, and I'll be taking you through the race recaps of our week. And we were at the Zandvoort circuit, the Dutch Grand Prix, a very tricky circuit, quite new on everyone's mind. It's kind of still new on the calendar, so it was tricky for everyone to kind of get into a rhythm still at this track, but provided some good action and some close racing and some interesting moments along the way. But yeah, a few interesting results came. But we start off with Sunday in F2. And F2 was an interesting one for me. Obviously, this was one of the first races I've been away from F2. Obviously, I'm now in F1, challenging myself in there. But I can't on this one, having a break from streaming. He should be back at the Spanish Grand Prix, but it was me in the comms box with Easton, and it was a good race, good battles everywhere. Obviously our first or second technically taste of the Zandvoort circuit. And kind of the story was really, and it kind of set the tone for the week, is because of how small the track was and how close and competitive each tier was, whenever the leaders pitted, they kept coming into traffic. And it was kind of tough to kind of go through that traffic, especially if someone was going long and hard tyres. Yeah, it was definitely a very interesting one, and it seemed though, especially with the two racing points of Lukey and Shrimper. Obviously, welcome back Shrimper to racing once again. But yeah, Lukey and Shrimper had a difficult qualifying session. I think they were both out in Q1, so they decided to start on the hard tyres, and they did pretty well in that first stint. But what it meant is that they were coming an annoyance to those that were at the front, the likes of Dangerous Dan and Breezy. I believe Breezy actually took the pole and was looking to have a good result for this race, Breezy in the Renault, because he's had a difficult start to the season. He was going very strong. BF1 Racer as well in the Alfa Romeo was having a good, strong race, going long on his tyres in the first stint. Kind of the first stint kind of went through not really many highlights, although there were some good battles going through, as I mentioned. Unfortunately, there was a disconnect for Shrimper on lap 20, which cost him quite a bit in this race, because he was kind of following his teammate Lukey around in the first stint, again going long with his tyres, but was doing pretty well, as I said, until a disconnect dropped him back, I think, outside the top 10 as well, which was a shame. One of the main highlights of this race was the battle between Stygian and Little Sparks, which on lap 21 they went for 4 corners from the exit of turn 4 to turn 8 in the middle sector, side by side, and very good racing. Just kind of what you expect to see really in every tier, but especially around this track where it was so narrow and kind of flowing, almost one line all the way through the middle sector. It was good to see the two then going side by side. But the key moment of the race, really, that kind of turned on its head, as it normally does, is a safety car. And this happened was on lap 22 when Sink Dan in the Ferrari, of course, still adjusting to F2 life, being promoted from F3 after Vietnam. He unfortunately crashed, and that brought out the safety car. And the people that benefited the most were the two racing points. Unfortunately, Shrimper's disconnect hampered him a little bit, but Lukey and BF1 had just pitted onto soft tyres, and because of the safety car came up a lap after, it meant that BF1 Racer and Lukey, who were on small chance for points, ended up in possible podiums. So that was good for them. Under the safety car, though, there was a weird moment for Milan, who was right near the top in the Ferrari, was having a good strong race up to this point. Had a weird pit stop. He came in, but he didn't change tyres. He was still on the hard tyres that he was still on from when he pitted the first time, which was really weird. So he came back in, but that meant that dropped him way out from challenging for this win to right in the midfield, and he had to recover, but he did recover very strongly. Safety car basically set this race off completely because it closed up everyone else, and there were battles all over the place, especially for the midfield. Another safety car, though, came out on lap 28. I'm not sure what happened with that one, but yeah, once again that kind of stabilized the field only a few laps later after the first one. Unfortunately, though, a few laps to the end, lap 32, Dangerous Dan lost his braking into turn 1. Unfortunately connected with BF1 Racer, spinning the Alfa Romeo driver into the wall at turn 1. They were both behind Muddy Biscuit. It just seemed lost concentration. That's all it was, and that's all it takes sometimes. Damage for both Dan and BF1 Racer dropped them out of points paying positions. But this late safety car meant that Lukey was in the Racing Point, came out in, I think, 4th on the road, and managed to get by Muddy Biscuit, who was trying to go to the end on long, hard tyres. Managed to get past Muddy, and was right behind Breezy after that other safety car on lap 28. And was desperately trying to find a way through it, but couldn't manage to do so. Breezy obviously wanted, as I said earlier, to get a good result in this race because he had an unlucky start to the season. He had defended very, very well. Gutsy performance from Breezy in the Renault, and eventually held on to the win by 0.2 2/10 of a second over Lukey. As I said, great defending from him. Lukey came across the line in 2nd place, which is a good drive considering he was outside, or he was eliminated from Q1. Muddy Biscuit, though, actually also did a great defensive drive to hang on to 3rd place, which means Muddy Biscuit has stayed on the podium for the first 5 races, which is a great start for Muddy Biscuit. And in some ways, including myself, many people aren't really that surprised because of his consistency. We've said this all along about him. He's a definite championship contender that could look to the front because he knows how to keep his car out of trouble. He also defended 3rd from 3 really fast cars behind him, and that was including FFR Milan, who was recovering from his weird pit stop. Steffi in the Red Bull as well. Also a recovering Magic Marks, who'd been through a couple of spins in the Williams. But yeah, Muddy definitely showed his great defending character, along with Breezy. But yeah, as I mentioned, Breezy won the race, his first race of the season. First win of the season, sorry. And definitely gets his championship up to a good start. With that, Lukey, though, in 2nd place, he's had a strong start to the season as well. The only blip being China last week, obviously with no points. But apart from that, he's looking very good and could challenge Muddy Biscuit. As I said, Muddy Biscuit not been off the podium so far this season. The question for me is, when is that going to stop? Not to put a curse on him. Don't want it to happen. But we all know, obviously, it can go wrong very, very quickly, very easily. So, but if you can keep that consistency up, definitely looking very strong. FFR Milan spinning the points all season long. 4th place for him in the Ferrari. Again, a good recovery drive. Could have been a lot better, of course, to challenge Breezy towards the end, but again, a weird pit stop. Still don't know why. 5th place for Steffi in his 2nd race in the Red Bull. Good points for them. 6th for Magic Marks. His best result so far. 7th for Sink Saiju, also known as Malibu now, in the Haas. So Good result for her. 8th place for JS Lee in the Alfa Romeo, picking up good solid points from the beginning. Little Sparks in 9th in the Alfa Romeo, and the top 10 were eventually finished off by Sturridge getting his first point of the season after he's become a full-time driver in the Renault. So overall, good race from F2. Yeah, good stuff. Obviously, a few issues, a few difficult issues. One of which has led to BF1 race unfortunately leaving the league at the end of the race, which is a big shame. I'm sure, I hope he will be okay going forward wherever he's ended up. I believe he's racing somewhere else now. But yeah, real shame. But it is what it is. We're all going to move on. Yeah. So good stuff from F2. Yeah. Obviously, the championship's still moving forward. I believe Muddy Biscuit obviously has the championship lead, and I believe Lukey is in 2nd place. And yeah, the biggest question for me is, can Muddy Biscuit keep up this brilliant consistency that he's done so far? Because another point to be added with him not being off the podium, there's been more than one time where he's been outside the top 10 in qualifying. So again, his race pace is very, very strong. And of course, they will head to Spain next week, hopefully providing another good race. It's good stuff from F2 there. Moving on to the F3 division, which was on Monday, and boy golly did we have issues from the commentator's point of view. We had a really annoying audio glitch with the stream where we cannot include audio. And then this was the first day where it became a huge problem, because it was meant to be Craig Senna and Easton commentating. Craig couldn't include his audio, so we then had to revert to somebody else, being Ripon One Shot, who very, very kindly stepped in for comms for this evening on Monday. And unfortunately, the issue continued. So Ripon One Shot, bless him, and I must say thank you for Ripon One Shot if he hears this or someone tells him. Massive thank you, because he did this all by himself, and he did a very good job. Kept the entertainment up and was very much into the race. But yeah, F3 obviously used to have the dominant VRC Dan in here. Obviously, he's up into F2, challenging himself up there. It's opened up the championship pretty much from then on. So again, it's whoever can keep up the solid results week in, week out is going to be near the top at the end of it. But do think this tier 3 is going to go very close to the wire at the end of this. But it was a debut race. This was kind of the biggest thing. The debut race for Mega Centurion in the house. Now, I believe after this race he has been moved to F2, same as VRC Dan. So again, good luck to him. But this was his first debut race, and what an impression! But we'll get to him. Safety car lap 1 of this race. Shane unfortunately got disqualified in a very baffling incident. Looked like contact with Millsy and Stretch. Spun Shane in kind of a bit of confusion through turn 1. And then he was stuck on the edge of the pit lane and couldn't get moving until obviously the pack had gone by. But because he'd stayed there on the exit of the pit lane, he was disqualified for blocking the pit lane, which is a really weird one. It just almost says everything about this game, the issues that it has. Yeah, nothing much else to say, to be honest. And he was out on the first lap. Pens aplenty and damage plenty for many cars in that incident, so difficult start for F3. But it was Beast Pro in the Ferrari that was leading this race and was looking very, very strong until lap 7. Virtual safety car came out and Beast Pro was a little bit too quick with the Delta, and unfortunately got a drive through that really cost him his lead in the race. Was looking very good up until that point, but we shall see eventually at the end a great comeback drive from Beast Pro in the Ferrari. One of the main highlights of this race, lap 13, battle of Quirky Turtle, Eyes and Spooky. Quirky Turtle leading ahead of Spooky, then Eyes got nipped on the inside of Spooky, and then Eyes had to go to Quirky. So that was a good battle on that lap. Actually lasted for a few laps, but lap 13 in particular, when they were swapping positions a few times there. Lap 16 was a really frightful moment for Millsy. Lost it into the last corner, clipped the grass on the inside of the banking, and literally T-boned into the side of Cooper Benz, who at this point was having a solid-ish race in the midfield, was coming up and making positions, and literally just squashed the nose of Millsy's car. Could have squashed the side of Cooper Ben's car, literally pushed him into the banking, and amazingly Cooper Benz managed to carry on, but he got had no front wing at the end of it. Millsy as well was able to carry on. Very, very lucky for the pair of them, but very unlucky at the same time that Cooper Benz had nowhere to go. Not Millsy's fault as well, just clipped the grass, and that was it. What it did do though, was it caused a safety car, and it was absolutely perfect for Mega Centurion, because at this point Mega Centurion had, I think he started 11th, and he was on the medium tyres, and he was going very long on those medium tyres, and managed to move himself into a leading position, or he was leading until the safety car came out. It was perfect timing for him, because it meant that he pitted and retained the lead ahead on his hard tyres. So yeah, bit of luck, but also good pace to keep himself out of trouble as well, because he had to go through all of the stuff ahead of him. And as I said, meant he kept the lead. And he kept the lead to the end, and eventually won by RSF over Sainz by 2/100ths of a second over the line. Sainz nearly nabbed him on the line after a good exit. But yeah, great first impression for Mega Centurion, who again I believe has been moved into F2. So we'll see him, how he gets on the Sunday. Yeah, Sainz nearly getting that win, and that would have been Sainz's first win of the season, but still a good solid result for Sainz in second place, maintaining his challenge for the title in this very early stage. Third place for the great comeback drive from Beast Pro in the Ferrari, gets his first podium of the season. Very well deserved, as I said, especially with the problems that he's had. Peachy Pig in the Renault came home in fourth place. A good result for him. Peachy Pig is one of those, I think the first 4 races he's had some horrific luck to not match his pace. His pace has been quite strong, qualified reasonably well in F3 this season, but the results haven't backed that up until now. Hopefully this is a turn in fortune for Peachy Pig in the Renault, because definitely should be a lot higher in that 4th place. 5th was Falcon in the Williams. Ever since Bahrain, it seems that he has turned on the pace and the consistency, and he's bringing home good results for the Williams team. 5th place for him. 6th place, I do not have a result on my notes, because that must have been another reserve that came through. 7th was Stretch, who has been in the points in the Mercedes every race this season, so good result for Stretch. P7 for him. 8th place for Quaker Oats. Obviously couldn't match the win from China last week, but still got another good 4 points for the AlphaTauri team. 9th for Millsy, continues his point scoring record in the Alfa Romeo again, despite that very scary incident for him. And Toxic CW, also known as Spooky, managed to get into 10th place, picking up the last point. So good stuff for a 3. As I said, it's still pretty much open at this point. No one's really taking this division by the scruff of the neck, which is also a good thing. Keeps it very, very open. By the looks of it, seems to me that either Sainz, Stretch, no points to Camo this week will drop him back a little bit. Falcon's moving himself into contention as well. Again, the fact that we're not getting like back-to-back winners, it seems, ever since VRC Dan has left, makes this even more intriguing. So again, this is going to be down to who can keep the points up solidly. Again, Stretch's consistency in the Mercedes could put him into contention. It'll be interesting to see how Spain will go, because Spain next week is more of a traditional track. It's more where the pace of tiers will start to show. I think next week in Spain, we'll see the title contenders in terms of raw pace start to move forward. So yeah, again, I'm intrigued as a viewer to see how F3 is going on, and yeah, definitely very entertaining so far. Moving on to F5. Obviously, sorry for the quickness of this. Obviously, I'm by myself today, and obviously a little bit different. But we do need to tune these podcasts down. But obviously, next week it should return to normal. So hopefully you still enjoy this, and whenever you watch this, and yeah, hopefully this should be a good listen for you. F5 is next, and this was a very intriguing race for F5. Of course, F5 being arguably the most entertaining of it, because again of how open it is. And the question going into this race for myself, obviously commentating on it now, and I am full-time commentating on it back again once, again on the Tuesday with Rogue. So, and I'm looking forward to it. Because again, this is a very open championship. And the question for me going into this race is, could we have 5 different winners from 5 different races? Could we keep the streak going? And well, it was definitely a very fascinating thing to watch. But the first thing to note in qualifying was a 5-place grid penalty for Invade and Raikkonen. Obviously, Invade now full time in F5 in the AlphaTauri. Has really obviously shown that he can mix it up with the front runners of F5, obviously won in Vietnam as well before he became a full-time driver in AlphaTauri. And this was his first race. But it didn't start off very well because, as I said, he got a 5-place grid penalty with Raikkonen. Just seemed an odd incident in the middle sector. Obviously, in qualifying, it's difficult to get out of people's way, especially if someone else makes a mistake in front of you. Such a narrow track. And I think it was just an unfortunate set of events between them two. Was also a ready up from Invade, I believe, at the start of the race. So again, he will have a couple of penalties, I believe, going his way for Spain. Obviously, hopefully he can recover. But obviously, the biggest thing was Raikkonen's 5-place grid penalty, because he made it through in the Q3, and I think qualified 4th initially, which put him back down to 9th. So and obviously that would into play later in the race. The race got underway, and first thing was RSF1 double, obviously his home race going into today. Started on pole, but started on the medium tyres, and obviously didn't get the better start to McCracken, who started on the front row next to him. Lost the lead past turn 1, but was still okay, but had a slide through turn 3, managed to correct it, but hit the back of McCracken, causing himself damage. And very positively and very good in my view, actually stayed on the outside of the banking of turn 3 and allowed the pack to go through rather than trying to get back into the race as quickly as possible. Very good race, spatial awareness and sort of race awareness from double, but it did mean he fell to the back of the field. I think he fell back to 18th. In this, and that was just the start of a topsy-turvy race for double in this one. And the race obviously carried on from there. FRT Invade, though, after his 5-place grid penalty, which dropped him way outside the top 10, I believe. I think it was in 14th. He's actually recovered up into the top 10. I think about that 5, but unfortunately had a spin at the end of the chicane and broke his front wing, so he was trying to recover from that incident now. Biggest highlight in the first stint was Raikkonen, who was obviously moving from his grid penalty. Made a good move on lap 7 on the turn 9 on X-Mando, just chucked it up on the inside. Very, very fortunate, opportunistic move on the inside. I think Mando made a little bit of a mistake. So that meant Raikkonen was up to 6th place from starting from 9th. So he was having a good race to begin. VSC, virtual safety car on lap 16. Invade going off at turn 3. Again, he was still trying to recover anything from this race, but again had another spin at turn 3, so it was unfortunate for him. But the biggest moment of the race, one of the kind of the talking points, was another virtual safety car 3 laps later, lap 19. RSF1 Hippo, who was having a difficult race around Zandvoort, lost it on the grass on the run up to turn 6. Again, brought up the virtual safety car, and this unfortunately gave a drive-through to McCracken, who is leading this race comfortably ahead of RSF1 Source. It was a little bit too quick on the Delta, similar to Beast Pro the day before, and as I said, got a drive-through, dropped him down to 4th place, which meant leading the race was RSF1 Source, who was already driving well up until that point in a solid 2nd place, but found himself in the lead to try and control it. And this was on lap 23, I believe this was. So still a few laps to go, and the question was, could he maintain it over the rest of the pack? This also moved Raikkonen, who at this point had moved into a potential podium, up into 3rd place, and ended to 2nd when he passed Tedist, because Tedist was up there with the leaders. So it meant that Source was leading by about 6 or so seconds ahead of Raikkonen in 2nd, Tedist 3rd, and a recovering McCracken to see whether he could get back on the podium. And then behind them was a good little battle with Daniel recovering double. Again, doubles roller coaster race. Was 18th at the end of the first lap, got back up to 8th by lap 18, and was gradually moving himself back into the points. Obviously, virtual safety cars kind of helped him as well, but he still managed to keep going. 6th on lap 29, pitted, and was on course for a good solid 5th place until he had an incident with tacticals, very similar to last week. That's an unfortunate connection. Looked like the tyres locked between him and tacticals on lap 31. Both of them got damage, which was a real shame for the pair of them. Came out 11th, still managed to finish 8th, and I have to be completely honest with Double. I think it's fantastic character, considering he is of a young age, and I think it's just incredible because it shows great maturity. Most people, especially after starting on pole, would just retire just there, if something goes wrong. I mean, I've done it in the past, but it definitely shows. He kept on going, getting points, and those 4 points, it may not seem a lot, but those 4 points might mean all the difference by the end of the season. Still a long season to go. And he's another one. It's like Peachy Pig in F3. I think he has the pace of F5, to challenge up on the front. Just need results to back him, and I think he will do it. I think, because he still hasn't won a race yet, I think his first race win is there. Just needs all the luck to come together, which all needs to come into place when you're league racing. You need pace, you need luck, and you need consistency. All 3 things will come together for him, I am sure. But yeah, still great recovery drive for 8th, considering all that he went through. 3-second penalty for Raikkonen on the last corner, about 4 laps to go, meant that Raikkonen had to push at the end, and that brought initially McCracken and Tedist ahead of Raikkonen. And despite the extra pace that Raikkonen managed to find, he did manage to get up to about nearly 2 seconds. It seemed the penalty was going to cost him a podium. But he got kind of a lucky break because McCracken hit the wall on the last corner in the banking 3 laps from home and managed to get some wing damage, but still he had about 20 seconds back to 5th place, so managed to hold on to 4th. What it meant that Raikkonen was able to hang on to the podium, and in fact actually he had so much extra pace to find that he managed to actually hold on to 2nd ahead of Tedist, to come home in a very good 2nd place. But it was RSF1 Source that meant that we had 5 different winners from 5 races in F5, and RSF1 Source finally, for me, justice for Australia, because obviously he was on course for a pretty convincing or comfortable win, it seemed. 2/3 into that race at the beginning of the season. He's now eventually got it. And yeah, great stuff for him. Obviously, great podium for Raikkonen. His first in almost 2 seasons, because his last podium, he told me, was in Bahrain last season. So, great second place for him. Obviously, his championship can finally start now of his first podium of the season. And Ted is back on the rostrum since Australia, where he won in Australia. He's back on the podium in 3rd place, and he will back into championship contention. In terms of the championship, I believe McCracken still retains the lead. He still came home in 4th place after, again, a win taken away and then a podium taken away, but still a 4th place. Still shouldn't be too disheartened about that. I believe he still just retains the lead over his teammate Andy. Andy had a difficult race, but still managed to pick up points. 5th place for Daniel in the Red Bull. He was on no points after Vietnam, but a 6th and a 5th in the last 2 races has really started his championship off nicely. 6th place for going to reserve at this point. 7th for Lincoln in the Racing Point. He continues on his point scoring record. Has been in the points all for the first 5 races. The only driver in F5 to do so, so he's doing very nicely. 8th for Double. Obviously, we mentioned his topsy-turvy race in the Mercedes, but still managed to pick up 4 points. 9th for Andy Yuskin. Again, a difficult race for Andy. Wasn't looking forward too much to the race, but still managed to pick up 2 points for him. And 10th was Force Majeure in the AlphaTauri. Continuing his little points record that he's got at the moment. It's good stuff from him. In terms of the Renaults compared to the Racing Points, it does seem to me that the Racing Points are kind of moving in and trying to challenge the Renaults. The Renaults are still leading the championship in the Constructors, McCracken and Andy. Having a good solid start for the Renault team, but the Racing Points are there, and obviously the win for Source and the points record that Lincoln has could challenge it, and that could be a fight down to the end between those 2 teams. But good stuff from F5, and very entertaining to watch. And again, me and Rogue will hopefully should enjoy the rest of the season on Tuesdays. Alright, 2 more to go, and it's the F1 division on the Wednesday, and again we had a similar issue to Monday early in the week with the audio issue. So Blazer Guns again did a very good job in the commentary position all by himself. So again, thank you very much to Blazer for that. But this, obviously, the story going into this race was the 2 great starts from Midzi in the Red Bull and Easton in the AlphaTauri. Both haven't been off the podium. Of course, Midzi had been on the back of 2 wins in Vietnam and China, but the question was, can he make it 3 in a row? And in qualifying, he was blisteringly quick. Good couple of tenths ahead of a very competitive tier of a very close track. Was very formidable, but he clearly loves this track and was flying in qualifying and took the pole. Ahead of Corey Marshall in the Alfa Romeo, who was looking to recover after a difficult race in China. But Corey Marshall's race ended up to have a faulty start through turn 1 because he got tipped into a spin by Adolf in the Williams. It's got a little bit too close for comfort, and damage for the Alfa Romeo driver, as well as Easton in the AlphaTauri, who has just got caught up in that, and it caused a little bit of confusion at the rear of the field, which also brought out the safety car on the first lap. So yeah, damage for a few people there, and not a great start for them. Lap 7, Adamar clipped the curb through turn 9 or 10, I think it is. Just went straight into the wall, was out on the spot. And that was another safety car on lap 7. And this meant that most of the field pitted for hard tyres, because the hards could quite easily go to the end from there. And most of the field, though, Corey Marshall decided to stay out and lead on the medium tyres that he pitted for at the end of the first lap, and to try and build the gap over the rest of the field. Because again, as I mentioned earlier before, it was a very close field because of such a close track. Lap 8, unfortunately, my first race in F1 ended as I crashed under the safety car trying to catch the field. I clipped the curb on the outside of turn 6 and it spun me into the wall, and that was it, I'm afraid. Real shame for myself, and it was a really frustrating mistake because could have so easily been different, but hey ho. Our pace wasn't too bad, to be honest. Not as bad as I thought it was going to be initially. So yeah, it's not as difficult as I imagined it to be. So positives looking forward, but still very frustrating to crash into the safety car there. And once the safety car came in, the obviously question for Corey Marshall in the Alfa Romeo, my teammate, was to try and sort of gain a lead on his medium tyres he decided to stay out on, ahead of a train of cars, which included Karun, Midzi, Natdog, Brezina, Easton, Pigeon Munch, all in there. And it was a massive train of cars, about 8 or 9 cars going back. Midzi, though, who, as I said, comfortably leading the races of the safety car, actually came out in 3rd place and moved into 2nd once he got by Karun, or IGN Legends, and was gradually trying to get the lead, or gap to the leader back for Corey Marshall. Corey Marshall eventually pitted on lap 21, came out in 6th place, did a very good job getting a gap on the field, and because they were battling so ferociously, again managed to come out in 6th place on the medium tyres and to try and get back into 2nd, and then eventually challenge Midzi. But the train of cars was ridiculous. For the last 6 laps of the race, he had Brezino in the Renault, followed by Natdog, followed by Lando in the Williams, Mansell in the Mercedes, Adolf in the Williams, Easton, who was stuck in the middle of all this. Remember, reigning champion and championship leader going into this, was stuck in all this. And then the 2 racing points of Cuddy and Hardy, who had pitted late for soft tyres. Both of them were trying to pick their way through. It was very, very difficult, considering how competitive this tier is. And yeah, it was fascinating to watch. But all it took was a mistake and you were just completely out of it. And unfortunately, Lando did get that mistake, got damaged into turn 1 on lap 31 of the race in his Williams, and unfortunately dropped to the rear of the field. Just slightly outbraked himself, and because of the train, he hit the car in front, and that was his points chance over. The following lap, lap 32, IGN Legends, who had pitted for hard tyres on the safety car on lap 1, was trying to get the hards all the way to the end, and unfortunately they punctured a rear left puncher on lap 32 just on the exit through turn 3, and that cost him his podium because he was hanging on to a pretty decent 3rd place ahead of Pigeon Munch in the AlphaTauri. As I said, Corey had managed to get himself into 2nd place behind Midzi, but Midzi was just really comfortable in the lead. As soon as he got the lead, he was just maintaining a very strong pace, and unfortunately Corey wasn't able to get him. So Midzi ended up winning the race in the Red Bull, a very convincing drive, and a statement really, I think, because 3 wins in a row this also meant. So he's looking very, very good at the start. 2nd for Corey Marshall, back on the rostrum. A difficult race in China put to one side, so he's back into contention. 3rd place, and his first podium of the season. Our first podium in RSF1 was Natdog in the Ferrari, who was looking very, very good all evening, to be honest, so definitely deserved this 3rd place, but he got Pigeon Munch over the line by 0.11 of a second. Pigeon unfortunately got a puncher, left front puncher I believe it was, 2 corners from the flag, and Natdog got him on the line. Still, take nothing away from Natdog though, a very deserved 3rd place for him. Pigeon, despite the punches, still came home in 4th place. So good stuff for the AlphaTauri team because they're looking very good to begin. 5th place for Kid Cuddy, had a difficult last couple of races in the Racing Point, but he came out in 5th, just ahead of his teammate Hardy, so good points for Racing Point, 5th and 6th. 7th for Easton. He wasn't looking forward to Netherlands at all, so the fact that he came home with 7th place, I still think he should be relatively happy, but of course Mid-Seas got himself an advantage over him. 8th place for Adolf in the Williams, so good points for him. 9th for Brezina, his first 2 points of the season for Brezina. He's had a difficult start, but hopefully this will be a turn for him. And Joe Pilkey, in his first full-time drive for Haas, picked up the last point in the top 10. So yeah, big turning point, big twist in the championship story. Could this be key by the end of the season? Mid-Sea taking the win with Easton down in 7th. Easton's got to recover next week in Spain. He'll be key to get back. But of course Lando, who was keeping it up with the championship leaders, of course runner-up last season, had a difficult race this week. He'll be looking to come back as well. So Spain will be very interesting for the top tier. And of course you've got the very tightly packed midfield all battling for the points as well. Yeah, good stuff for F1, and of course once again they'll be back for Spain next week, next Wednesday. And finally we have the F4 race, which of course took place last night. Fortunately we didn't have an audio issue this time, so Spooky and Malibu took us through the action of this race. And boy oh boy, was this a very entertaining Grand Prix, made due to the fact it was raining, and rain around Netherlands, as it proved, is treacherous as anything, especially with full wets. But we had a wet qualifying. Q3 intermediates, Q2 intermediates, and Q1 had the very, I think it was about 6 minutes of dry running, the only dry running that F4 got the entire evening. Because the race started on full wet weather tyres, and the conditions proved to be very, very tricky. Not much, pretty good battles, a few battles here and there, but not much overtaking. It was just a survival of the fittest, as it proved to be. But we started off with the first lap. Alco Saints, who of course won in China last week, unfortunately crashed out 3 corners into this race through turn 3. Obviously the tricky conditions didn't help, but he also got damage for Cornish. Scotsman and Jamie also got caught up in that. Yeah, obviously it was very almost understandable because of how much rain there was, with the spray and everything else. But the race carried on, and they tried to cope with the conditions. Rogue on the last corner crashed in his Alfa Romeo. Had a pretty good solid start. I think he was running in 5th or 6th at this point. But he DNF'd on the last corner, and a VSC came out on lap number 5. But that was the first of obviously the full course yellow. XRL Cornish, who was in a good run of form going into this race, obviously a 2nd and a 6th going into here, unfortunately crashed on the run down to turn 6, and that was the first appearance of the safety car on lap number 6. And it was at this point that most of the grid went for intermediate tyres, because at this point the rain was starting to ease off. Apart from the top 4, Caesar Wizard, Unseen, Graded Vinny and Button decided to stay out on the full wets. The highest of those that would pitted onto the Inters was actually one of the first drivers to do so, was Primus Gaming. He had judged the conditions, and he'd actually judged it to pretty good effect to move himself into a strong podium contention. A couple laps though, once the safety car restarted, Fishsticks connected with Toxic MW, which caused a couple of cars behind to get caught up. That's also brought out safety car for a 2nd time, and it meant that Primus led the race because the top 4 then decided to pit on the intermediate tyres. So at this point the whole grid by lap number 12 were now on the intermediate tyres. Still very, very tricky conditions, as it proved later on in the race. Caesar Wizard, though, was looking in pretty ominous form in this race, looking very good in the wet. Made a good move on UK Demons into the chicane for third place, and he was gradually moving himself back up through the field once he'd pitted on his intermediate tyres. Chris LFC crashed on the last corner in a pretty chaotic incident because Eddie Fawn in his first race and Craigie Senna hit him, all of that causing a safety car for a third time on lap 16. And then under the restart of that one, Old Manzi and Vrede Vinny connected on the last corner, which also caught out unseen in the Williams. Was having a strong race up until that point. So yeah, the last corner of the banking proving very, very tricky for everyone involved. And then the safety car came out for the fourth and final time, because obviously you can't have 5 or more virtual or full safety cars. This one I'm unsure of the reason. Nobody spun, I don't think. There was no damage, there was no DNF. It was just it just came out on lap 20. But yeah, it stabilised the field once again. And at this point, Primus was leading the race in the Mercedes, but he was very slowly being caught by Caesar Wizard, who, after getting a great run out of the last corner on the banking, made a lovely move for the lead into turn 1 and retained the lead from there. So a great win for Caesar Wizard. Of course, he has now been moved into F2. I believe he asked to move into F2, so it's a very positive thing to look that people want to challenge themselves in the higher tier. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on in the higher tier. I hope he does very well, because I think he'll be all right moving forwards. But obviously, those that want to see how he does, make sure you join us on the Sunday for that. Second place for Toxic MW in the Haas. Obviously backs up his second place from China last week. Third place for Primus, back on the rostrum once again, and he said he was very, very happy with the podium, and a very well-deserved podium for him in the Mercedes. Fourth place for Jessie Racer, her best result of the season so far. Obviously had a difficult last couple of races, but back on the good points once again, and was also showing some very good form in the tricky conditions. Mason Dunk in his second race in full time, 5th place in the AlphaTauri. Head of UK Demons 6, so another good point score for the AlphaTauri team. 7th for Barry in the Alfa Romeo, so good points for Barry in 7th. 8th for Unseen, despite everything that he went through the race, managed to get through 8 points. 9th for RSF1 Scotsman, who had a couple of spins and instances, but managed to keep it, get it to the checkered flag. And finally, Fish Sticks rounds off the top 10, and 10 people actually finished this race after 20 that started, so a very, very tricky race to end off the week in around Zandvoort. But great stuff from Tier 4. Obviously, they did have a streak going of different winners for different races, but of course Wizard ended that, but of course he's now moved up, so technically they still do have the streak going. But yeah, very treacherous Grand Prix, very intriguing Grand Prix to watch, and yeah, it was very good stuff from F4. And that's the end of the week. So yeah, definitely some good, interesting stories with the tiers. I think similar. I did kind of think going into the beginning of the week that Zandvoort would throw up a few surprises, and it was proved, because it's still relatively new in people's minds. So a few surprises, a few new winners could move forward, and we did. We had a few good stories. But we do head to Spain now, and this is a very traditional track. I'm just going to show you round here for a bit, just to end this little podcast, just for a few minutes. Yeah, this is a very traditional track. A lot of people know this track like the back of their hands. It's difficult to get quick around here. There's a lot of corners that can throw people about a little bit, so it'll be interesting to see who can take this. It's obviously very, very different in wet conditions, but let's have a look. See, just well, of course I don't have a setup, so I need to grab someone just so to make this a little bit more comfortable. Where have we got? Where's my old one? There it is. Load the setup. Make sure it's attached. Yes, it is. Sweet. So let's take you through a few laps around here. Very tricky circuit, especially this last chicane. It's I still find it very annoying, kind of fiddly. Let's head down towards turn 1. Very long run down to turn 1. A lot of things can happen in the first lap of this race. You have so much time to think about where you're going to approach the car in this braking zone down into turn 1. And the curbs are very loose around this circuit. You can very easily lose the car through turn 2. Might see a few incidents through turn 2 going into turn 3 because the car likes to snap on you, especially on the first lap. As I said, very traditional track. It's been on the calendar for so many years now, so again, people know what it's like. It's obviously changed over the years, obviously with the game and everything. This is another corner up here, the uphill chicane of turn 7 and 8, especially that curb on the right hand side. And then turn 9, which is obviously a lot more easier now. But again, people can very much lose it very, very easily. And then into turn 10, the hairpin, could see a few diving moves. 11 and 12, you can, again, this curb on the left hand side can easily throw the car. Then into the final chicane. This final sector is kind of the make or break for me because the curbs are very high, especially this last chicane. You need to get it very much correct, and the exit is very much key as well. And obviously you've got the DRS at the end. Tyre wear is also very high around this track, so you've got to be very careful on your tyres. Yeah, and turn 2 and 3. It's key to get the exit through turn 2, so you can easily go flat through turn 3. Especially with these cars in this game now, turn 3 is easily flat if you can get the line perfectly. Turn 4 you can easily run very wide because the understeer. Again, through turn 5 this hairpin, kind of run a bit too wide. Again, this uphill chicane. Key is kind of extend the corner a little bit. As you can see, it's very easy to spin the car. Might see a few guys do that. And again, on the exit, you don't want to run on that curb on the exit at turn 9 because you can easily just chuck it into the wall. But I love the camera view you get on the first lap where you can see all the cars go through the corner because the camera is on turn 10 and into this final chicane. Again, very different track. Very tricky track when it rains. Changes this track completely. But we've seen a lot of hectic races around here. Remember, I think it was at Tier 5 last season where we had a safety car with 3 laps to go, and everyone with penalties just dropped down, and people that didn't have penalties flew up through the field. So it means the positions changed dramatically. I'll just get round, or I should restart the lap and let's see if I can do a quick hot lap. Race start, of course. So down into turn 1 with the DRS. Watching for your braking zone is over 200 miles an hour. And into turn 1. Just before the 50-meter marker board. Keeping the speed, and again the car really wants to snap wide through turn 2. And again you're flat through turn 3. It's easy in these cars now. And turn 4. Braking as you go onto the shadow. And the car really wants to drag over to the left. You don't want to touch the grass on the left hand side. In the hairpin. Turn 5. Run the car on the exit, but not too much. And 6, and then 7 and 8. Again, the car wants to snap halfway through, but you've got to watch over the curb. Maybe a little bit of a lift with turn 9, just so you can keep it on the track. Turn 10 hairpin again, you can have a lunge up on the inside, but it's very difficult to do. 11 and 12, don't go too far on the left hand side, otherwise you will be spinning off the grass. And keep the speed as much as you can, again not hitting the curbs too much. And then getting the chicane, you want to kind of attack the curbs a little bit, but attack them too much and it will throw the car. Then get the exit, a little bit of DRS, and across the line. So yeah, it should be a fun week, and of course this all begins on the Sunday. Rama should be back in the commentary box, and hopefully Diggles will be joining him as well, as the F2 boys kick off the week once again. And of course Monday will be F3. Again, hopefully we don't get too many issues, and obviously I'd like to put through a sort of a preparation for the week ahead. Obviously if we have any audio problems, obviously the streamers have been told that if there is any issues with the COCOM not including their audio, they have to go solo, they will have to do it by themselves. And obviously anybody that watches this, if you watch the races live, make sure you support the streamer. If they have to do it by themselves, it's a very difficult job to do. They will miss a few things because it's almost impossible to keep up with everything, especially with a race that is very close. So any support to them will be good if they happen to be in that position, because of course we're all obviously doing this as a hobby, not being paid, so make sure you do that. And obviously good luck to everyone ahead, and I'll be interested to see how the races unfold. Will there be any rain? Well, we shall see. Again, this track completely changes under the wet weather, especially full wets. Interesting how the strategy goes as well. Possibly 2-stop, I'm thinking, early going, because I don't really like the hard tyres around here at all. But if someone could work the hard tyres, take them for extremely long amount of time, would be good. Again, that turn 7 and 8, you saw the snap of the guard, wasn't even pushing, and it still snapped. And again, the track limits through there are going to be interesting. Yeah, should be an entertaining week going ahead. So hopefully you enjoyed the podcast. This little review, I know, is obviously slightly different than usual, a bit more quick and rapid fire, obviously by myself as well. So hopefully you've enjoyed it, and take care, of course, and we will see you on the Sunday evening for the F2 division for that race. Make sure you join us 8 o'clock, where it all kicks off at Spain.